What's going on, everybody? It is that time again, the Sooners Illustrated podcast, episode 184 on this Thursday, June 19th, 2025. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you. 72 days until the season opener, Oklahoma, Illinois State at the stadium. Making our way through. We talked about it a little bit on Tuesday with James and Tom. Things are pretty slow on the team side. Not at all on the recruiting side. A lot going on. You got to commit this week, got to decommit this week. We'll talk about both. Of course, we'll get the updates on the latest with the quarterback. Still waiting to see what's going to happen there with Jaden O'Neal and Bowe Bentley. And then, of course, the big weekend is upon us. ChampU BBQ has arrived. Right guy to break it all down. Collin Kennedy here with me, and we'll get into all of it on a recruiting Thursday. CK, busy times. You just today, you and I, we were supposed to record this like 2 hours ago almost, but you were dealing with some stuff, baseball, another transfer. That delayed us another 15, 20 minutes. You just kind of, that's how it goes. Sometimes it just kind of all comes crashing at once, and it's a busy time right now, busy week, busy weekend.
Could you imagine if you were traveling to Indianapolis right now for coverage of the finals? Because I know that's kind of for you, like the goal in mind, the sun at the end of the horizon.
Yeah.
But my goodness, today has been a mess. I am excited to try and navigate it all, and we're going to have some fun. You know, we're now settled in, ready to go. Let's just talk ball.
Absolutely. Like you said, the majority of Oklahoma, really the entire state of Oklahoma right now, is lasered in on Thunder as they try to win an NBA championship tonight. But there's a lot of recruiting stuff going on. So a lot of stuff on the OU football side, and I'm sure to kind of help people get their minds off it for a minute with the Thunder stuff. We'll see if they can win tonight. Hopefully they do. But we got a lot of recruiting stuff to talk about. Like we said, commitments, decommitments, updates, ChampU BBQ weekend. So without further delay, let's get into it. I want to start, Collin, first with DeZephen Walker. Now, we mentioned this kind of briefly on the Tuesday show with, Tom and James, just, noted that it happened. They committed on Monday. The running back from Peculiar, Missouri, is a four-star composite running back, getting OU into the running back column, DeMarco Murray on the board in 2026. But obviously, far, far better than we do. Talk about the player here. What did Oklahoma do to get Walker, and what kind of an addition is this? Into the fold as far as what kind of player he is, all that good stuff with DeZephen Walker into the boat here in 2026.
Yeah, starting with the profile, like you mentioned, four-star composite prospect at 247sports.com, carrying that coveted 89 player grade that we talked about not too long ago, which indicates a multi-year starter and impact player at the power forward level. Contrary to what social media would have you believe, and I'm obviously joking, having some fun here, 24/7 Sports, believe it or not, has DeZephen Walker ranked highest in the industry as the number 17 running back across the 26 cycle. You get a top 20 guy at his position, someone who's considered one of the best in the talented state of Missouri. I kind of think Missouri doesn't get enough flowers for the high school recruiting talent that comes out of the area, especially that region in general. And Walker, I think when you watch him, when you learn about him, 5'11" 190 pounds. At face value, I think people will try to describe him as like a power back. I don't think that's his game, though, Josh. I like to dig in. I see this as a player who, at his best, is employing excellent vision and a good amount of burst to create chunk yardage and is essentially maximizing every carry opportunity. I think he does some really good stuff in like inside zone. He's got a great feel for the game. I think he can get that like instinct going for when gaps or holes are opening up. And then once he gets into the second level, man, there's juice, obviously. Yeah. And I have a full kind of prospect breakdown on him. So anyone curious to learn more about his game or what he's about, I have 3 or 4 articles up about Walker currently. But I think transitioning over to the recruitment, his father got a shot at the NFL, played at Middle Tennessee State, even spent some time in NFL Europe. And I think that, his father actually ended up being the one announcing the commitment publicly, not DeZephen, which.
Is that a first for you?
I think that's a first for me because
Yeah.
I follow them both on X, Twitter, but truth be told, I had my notifications going for DeZephen,
Yeah.
and I had actually reached out to his father for just some feedback on the visit and everything. And lo and behold, neither notification goes off, and there's a commitment in place. Obviously, we got the story up relatively on time, so it's all good there. But pretty cool to see Walker Sr., if you will, put something out there about his son. And I think that's kind of where you start. You know, his father was very involved in this recruiting process, and because of that, because of his background, DeZephen took a pretty professional approach to the recruitment. I think that it was a very respectable approach, very accessible to coaches and media. I know a lot of people involved with that process are very thankful, myself included. And I think that when Oklahoma offered him in May, I mean, we're talking about essentially give or take a month for this to come together for Oklahoma. OU offers in May. DeMarco Murray takes an in-home visit out there with the Walkers at the back end of that month. And his first time in Norman following that sequence was for this official visit. Obviously, he was the only high school official visitor of the weekend on June 13th. And this thing swings in OU's favor in rapid fashion. And what I will say as well, Oklahoma gets its running back in 2026. Big deal. Shortly after, Walker announces another running back target in 2026, and Ryan Estrada makes his commitment to Minnesota out of the blue. Even more value in the addition of Walker. And then when you consider that not only have programs like Kansas State been very hopeful here, you know, Nebraska was scheduled to be his last official visit for this weekend. And the Huskers had every plan to try to shut this one down. And for Walker to make his decision after the OUOV and before that Nebraska trip, I think is arguably the biggest layer to the equation. It all is very positive for Oklahoma. Really quality get. Like I mentioned, everyone in the recruiting industry loves this player. Oklahoma loves him too. And I think everyone is thrilled at the end result.
Yeah. I think that there have been some critiques of DeMarco Murray, the last couple of years, nothing extreme, but there's been some critiques of, development or maybe, even simple, like playing the right guy throughout the course of a season last couple of years. But inarguably, in my opinion, DeMarco has done a phenomenal job at identifying and securing talent at the high school level, when they see fit. Like, they have recruited this position really well. And look, a couple guys haven't panned out to quite the level that maybe they had hoped or like we thought, guys like Caleb Hicks or Dalen Smothers, guys who kind of just came and were out the door after a year or two or whatever. But they've recruited the running back spot really well under DeMarco Murray. So, and a lot of these guys have been really, really talented, whether it's at Oklahoma or not. So, like, for me, if Oklahoma is identifying DeZephen, and like you said, he's not like he's not highly rated, because he is. And you look at his offer sheet, we talked about that a little bit on Monday, but this is a guy, like, I trust DeMarco Murray's ability to say, this kid can play for us. You bring him in like that. That's not an area that I worry about with Oklahoma at all when it comes to finding quality running backs at the high school level. So you bring in Walker and you look at his offer sheet and the other schools that are chasing him. And like you said, to do it so quickly, impressive. I think this is an impressive get from that perspective, for sure.
Yeah. And I would say that for Oklahoma to press on this recruitment that fast with not just DeMarco Murray, but someone like Jim Nagy in the mix. I mean, we're talking about Jim Nagy as someone that helped swing Jaden Ott over to Oklahoma's running back room with Murray. And if Nagy is someone that's given the green light on this accelerated of a timeline, then I think that's a testament to the player here. And I think at the end of the day as well, for me with Walker, something that I've been talking about with some folks in the industry right now is like Oklahoma really has to establish itself as a recruiting presence, specifically in the Midwest, because as you're in the SEC, OU is one of the few that can consistently rely on kind of that Midwestern territory while still playing at an SEC level.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to rely specifically on the Floridas, the Georgias, these highly contested recruiting grounds that have traditionally been in favor of SEC programs, it's going to make things very difficult, at least an uphill battle. And so to go out and find a guy like you mentioned, who a lot of people have very highly rated, OU had high on its board, and he's from the Midwest, so you're getting a SEC caliber back from a recruiting background that you want to continue to lean on. I think that there's even more to like here as OU tries to continue to strengthen its pipeline out there in the Midwest.
No doubt. So, yeah, lots of like player recruitment, where you got him from, a lot of angles of it to like for Oklahoma. Walker was the Sooners' 11th commitment in 2026. They only stayed 11 for a couple of days, though, as they slipped back down to 10 because Will Conroy, the IMG interior offensive lineman, center prospect, flipped to North Carolina yesterday on Wednesday. Collin, these are always hard to kind of be nuanced about here because I don't want it to make it – I don't want to set you up to be like, oh, Conroy's not any good, so it's no big deal. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do. But I guess basically putting in context, your understanding of kind of what happened and what the loss means for Oklahoma. Obviously, they just added Noah Best, last week. So you kind of looked at it as like, okay, they're off to a nice start with their offensive line class here. But then all of a sudden, Conroy is now flipping North Carolina. He's going to play for Bill Belichick and the Tar Heels. He's an IMG guy, which, I don't know what that, if that means anything, as far as, sometimes IMG players, they moved in. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of kind of context to it, I guess, at all. You'd be the best one to ask as far as just put it into context with Will Conroy flipping North Carolina this week. I was a guy who's been in the boat in the class for kind of a sneaky long time. He was one of the first guys in this class, and all of a sudden he's not in there anymore. He's going to UNC.
Yeah, and to be quite honest with you, I don't think that this comes as much of a shock. Obviously, he has been committed to Oklahoma since mid-December of 24, so there's some tenure here, right? Yeah. But if I remember correctly, a couple of months ago, so it was in March that I wrote a piece at SoonersIllustrated.com for our subscribers, basically kind of attempting to put my confidence level or a confidence percentage on each Oklahoma commit that had been in the class to that point.
Yeah.
And confidence that I had in OU's ability to hold on to them. And a primary reason why I ended up writing that article was because around that time was when Will Conroy started to go out and visit North Carolina and build that relationship. And look, you mentioned about the player, like Will Conroy is another 89 grade 3-star guy, like highly ranked player, number 23 interior offensive lineman in the country. Mm-hmm. If you're top 25 at any position nationally, you're pretty good. This is also someone who is going to probably play center at the next level. And true centers are a little bit harder to come by than you might expect. So, yeah, like it's a tough loss. But at the same time, I don't think it's one that Oklahoma did not see coming. Once those visits started taking place out to UNC and then the official visit got on the books and this buzz started to really build up around the spring, I think Oklahoma was operating under the assumption like, we got to really make sure we're on top of our P's and Q's on the interior offensive line front because Will Conroy is out here exploring options. And understandably so, his recruitment, right? So I think you mentioned exactly the primary layer to this. This off the heels of the addition of Noah Best is going to soften the blow, right? Especially because I do personally believe that Noah Best is someone who can play center for you. I think Noah Best can play all three spots on the interior. And I think Will Conroy, I think I mentioned this in the show the other day, is someone who it's a pretty comparable skill set. I thought those two were going to be able to move around and find a way to play alongside each other on the interior. Best is going to be able to theoretically replace that skill set. He'll be that guy moving forward. And Oklahoma, I've talked about this a lot. Look, it's not necessarily the best offensive line cycle in the region, but that's especially applicable to the offensive tackle spot. There are guards out there to pursue. The question, I think, will be who OU chooses to hone in on to replace Will Conroy. And that's probably a podcast topic for another day. But to close this out, Conroy goes on that OV. It was an anticipated one, Josh. And then, like, at some point, if a recruit is given an opportunity that not only he can't say no to, but the program he's committed to doesn't blame him for that either, if you catch my drift.
Yeah, right.
It is what it is. And I think Oklahoma is wishing Will Conroy all the best as he goes to UNC.
For sure. Not trying to spiral into a whole conversation, like you said. Does this, in your mind, put a little, not that it wasn't already emphasis anyway, but a little extra kind of emphasis on some of these other O-line targets now, your Deacon Schmitz and some of the other guys you mentioned? Like, okay, like if you get the other guys are chasing, it'll be fine. You don't, and it's kind of like, I wish we had maybe hung on to Conroy. You know what I mean? Is it one of those kind of spots now?
100%. I think that this only kind of increases the importance of the recruitment of Deacon Schmidt, who, like I mentioned, is going to make a commitment on, what did I say, 23rd?
I think.
Okay.
Yeah, June 28th, which is next Saturday.
Next week, Deacon Schmidt makes a decision. OU's in that top 3. I think Oklahoma is hopeful. I think Alabama is hopeful. I think Colorado is hopeful. So, like, making sure that one swings in the Sooners' favor, definitely an internal preference, right? I think that one guy I won't necessarily dive into a ton when we talk ChampU BBQ, but I'll bring up here Devin Robeson, the interior offensive lineman out of Pasadena Memorial. He's on the visitor list we put out. Oklahoma's getting his last official visit of this summer, and he's someone being pursued by the likes of TCU, Baylor, Stanford, Houston. He's kind of been a late riser in this cycle as he's gotten some combine stuff under his belt and things like that. You bring him in this weekend and you're able to swing that one in your favor, then, like, you're feeling a lot better. And honestly, Josh, too, like, in a world where, let's say, Oklahoma gets best, one more guard and like a Deacon Schmidt to commit, you take a 3-man class this cycle, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, especially because of the portal and then the amount of talent that's out there in 2027 on the offensive line. So,
yeah,
all hope is not lost.
Plus the group that brought in, obviously, too, C and Foj and Hollenbeck. I mean, the group that they're fired up about that are on this, right now, right? So,
and a lot of those young guys, too, in that guard room are redshirt guys. Like Daniel Akinkunmi, for example, is one that's like, man, he's got years to go. So, like, of all the positions that I'm keeping my eye on, like, guard is pretty low on my concern list. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Eddie Pierre-Louis. I mean, the list kind of goes on there. So, no doubt about it. And we'll keep an eye on those offensive line prospects. Like we said, Deacon Schmidt coming up next weekend. There's some other guys hanging out there, and we'll obviously keep you posted over on Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma.247sports.com. Yep, let's go ahead and do it. Quarterbacks. We've done this. It feels like almost every recruiting show for months.
Let's go.
We're winding down. I know we've been kind of saying that for like a month. We are legitimately winding down. We're getting close here. Jaden O'Neal, Bowe Bentley. The latest here, Jaden O'Neal just visited Florida State. He is still committed for now. He hasn't made anything public one way or another, but he did just visit Florida State. Bowe Bentley, meanwhile, out at Elite 11 right now, competing. We talked about this a little bit last week. Like, there's a chance that he was probably going to wait till after Elite 11, after that statement, and they kind of put out. And obviously, he's there right now. So we'll see if things start to really accelerate for him post Elite 11. But a little just check in here with you, Collin, as far as O'Neal and Bentley, what you kind of been hearing. I know everyone's just kind of pins and needles here. I mean, this is what OU fans are dialed into on the recruiting side right now. And again, O'Neal just visited Florida State. He is still committed to Oklahoma on paper at least, right? He hasn't announced anything. And Bowe Bentley told you last week, we talked about it on the show, if you missed it, pretty, not without explicitly saying it, but in a roundabout way, kind of said like, after Elite 11, I'm going to really probably make a call. And he's obviously there right now. So kind of checking in a little bit with you on both guys as far as where you think things kind of stand for you.
Yeah. So 2 things I want to preface this discussion by saying that, number one, I plan in it. Sooners Illustrated VIP access is 50% off right now, folks. So if you're out there and you want to get more information, like I'm telling you, I'm about to buckle down after this podcast and roll out a ton of stuff.
And shout out everyone who has subscribed. We get the numbers of, like 24/7 wide network. Sooners Illustrated doing really well in the month of June. We'll put it that way. So shout out to everyone who has subscribed this month.
I was told the other day that there was a point where we were leading the entire network and had added subscribers. So,
all right. Yeah, that's what we like to hear.
I think that's pretty. There we go. Hey, look at that lower third. Yeah, look, folks, if you want to come join us, a ton of people are. We have a really cool community at Sooners Illustrated. I think our message board is pretty great to be around, a lot of good discussion. And so I encourage y'all to go check it out. But on that note, my plan is to sit down and write a ton of like official visit primers and discussions over the next couple of days now that the full visitor list is out on the website. But the first thing I'm probably going to do after this pod is dive into everything that I know about these quarterbacks, because the second thing I was going to say, I know we talk about this every single week, and every single time people are like, ugh, but we actually have like a lot more out of this situation over just the last few days, even as of this morning, as I was making a ton of phone calls. So let's start with Bowe Bentley. He's at the Elite 11. I find it notable. The Elite 11 coaching staff puts out their own personal rankings of these players at the event. And I'm here to tell you, not our rankings, not anyone else's rankings, the Elite 11 rankings at time of recording out of like day 2 of the event, Bowe Bentley was top 3. So looks like he's doing pretty good for himself.
Doing well, yeah.
On that note, I think that he has pretty much confirmed to us at 24/7 that post Elite 11 decision is going to follow that timeline. He gave a rough ballpark estimate that I'm going to include in the notebook today, but we talked about it the other day. Like, there's a chance that it drags out a little bit. It sounds like that could be the case. And again, I'll write some of this stuff up after this. But basically, Bowe is telling us that, like, he's going to take a little bit of time. He wants to think. In my opinion, and this is me just making an educated guess, maybe just a guess, the longer this goes, the more that helps Oklahoma. And I believe I've said that before, but I just want to say it again, especially now that we know that Bowe is telling us that he might extend his timeline a little bit longer. Like, that Bentley family, they're big Oklahoma fans. I don't want to like overstep my boundaries here, but I've seen some of like the Bentley family social media accounts out there on like X or whatever, and like there's Oklahoma stuff in those usernames, if you catch my drift. So they're OU people. They love OU, and Bowe has wanted to play at Oklahoma. Yeah, like that to me is a big deal, man. And I know that LSU still feels as though they can win this recruitment, and I honestly think that they can. But if you're Oklahoma, I mentioned it the other day, like, if Bowe's taking his time, that's probably all you can ask for. The visit went about as well as it could have. That's all you can ask for. I think now, if you're Oklahoma, this is at least tracking the way you would want it to. And I think that as long as it stays on this track. And if there's an ability to continue to make pitches towards him and you can continue to make communication with this guy, then if you're Oklahoma, like, you got to be feeling good about yourself. So we'll see. I still think that if you ask anybody right now, this thing could go either direction. I feel like if you're Oklahoma, at least over the last week or so out of his official visit, you're like, okay, I think we're doing good. And hey, like, more power to you.
Yeah.
The other part of this is Jaden O'Neal. So this is another thing I'll probably go a little bit more in depth on the website, but made some phone calls today. Jaden O'Neal is on my visitor list for the weekend for the ChampU BBQ. He's on my list. I think whether or not he shows up is a big deal. And I'm not saying he is not. I'm not saying he 100% is. All I'm saying is there's a lot of conversations going on behind the scenes. And a lot of these conversations that have been held in the past have led to results that weren't indicated by some of these conversations, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that Jaden O'Neal and his ability to, all right, I got some notifications while we were on the pod and I had a heart attack. Okay.
Nothing pressing?
No, we're good. We're good. We're in the clear. That's the gig right now, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Jaden O'Neal took that official visit to Florida State. I think the best way I could describe that trip was that Florida State answered a lot of O'Neal's questions. New offensive coordinator in Gus Malzahn. Obviously, the Gus bus has a very signature offensive system perceived to him. I jokingly think a lot of folks call it the putt-putt offense, if you will. But
yeah,
the Gus bus got to sit down with Jaden, and I think that those conversations went well. I think Jaden O'Neal was shown that Florida State really wants him. I think I've mentioned this earlier, but Florida State's really just kind of down to Jaden O'Neal and Landon Duckworth at quarterback, and I think Landon Duckworth is trending elsewhere. So O'Neal goes on a visit. It goes well, opens his eyes to things out in Tallahassee. He comes back. He did show up to that camp from the last time we potted, which was before the OV. He was around Norman. He was around the coaches. Nothing officially came from those conversations. But I would say that one way or another over the next few days, it is everyone's belief that conversations and discussions of clarity are going to be had. And that could happen either during O'Neal's official visit at Oklahoma this weekend or before. And I am fascinated to see how this goes. So a crystal ball pick went in for Florida State from our guys at Knowles 24/7. Florida State's feeling very confident out of that official visit.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, like I mentioned, is next up on the schedule. It's just, man, sometimes with these quarterbacks, as we've seen, you just really never know. And so we're really entering a key stretch, I would say, following the conclusion of this podcast on, because I think O'Neal, more so than Bentley right now, is getting ready to figure some things out.
Absolutely. We're getting close, obviously. And, Jaden O'Neal, I think most of you fans are plugged in. They kind of get the deal in the situation. But, O'Neal puts out, in all caps, like, Tallahassee, I'm coming. And I, for a second, thought, did he just flip before he even – and I had to kind of read it twice because we're all on edge. We're all on alert right now. But, yeah, obviously he pumped up that visit. It was a big visit for him, and we'll keep an eye on it. Did you see the Brian Harris tweet yesterday?
The Todd Bates style.
Yes.
Yes.
You missed it. Brian Harris, who's obviously a 26 defensive line commit for Oklahoma, tweeted this yesterday, relatively out of the blue. If he was committed elsewhere, he'd flip. If he is taking second trips, this could lead him to turning in his chip, CHIP, coming here, I'll play for championships. And he tagged Bowe Bentley. We need you. Sooner Nation, help me let Bowe know how bad we need him. I mean, you got guys in the class actively, they're Todd Batesing him with
two things. Number one, when that tweet went out, someone messaged me and legitimately asked, is there any chance Todd Bates sent this to Brian Harris and asked him to copy and paste it? I don't know, but like if that was
non-zero chance, yeah.
Non-zero, but if Brian Harris came up with that himself, he is already learning a lot from the great Todd Bates.
Todd Bates shed a tear. If he came up with that himself, he definitely shed a tear reading that.
I mean, that's like genuine proud father territory.
Yes, exactly.
For one of the best defensive line coaches and poets out there. But then the second thing, how crazy is it that if I would have told you a year ago, Oklahoma's most active peer recruiter in the 2026 cycle would not be a quarterback, wouldn't be like a skill guy, it'd be a defensive lineman from Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Brian Harris is like leading the charge right now in 2026 recruiting, and I don't know that anyone had that on their bingo card, even as of a few months ago, right? Testament to him. I mean, he's on the OV list we put up today, and I put in his little blurb like, Brian Harris, as much as anyone in the class or on staff, is going to be the one trying his hardest to expand the 26 group. Cool to see him have Bowe Bentley in the crosshairs, if you will.
For sure. And you need that. I mean, normally, like to your point, that is the quarterback. Oklahoma doesn't really have that right now. I mean, Jaden O'Neal, obviously, we don't really know where things are at with him. And then you're still trying to get Bowe Bentley. So you kind of need someone else to step into that role, at least in the meantime. So cool to see Brian take it upon himself. But it just kind of caught my eye last night of kind of like okay, these other guys can kind of feel it like we need to lock this dude up. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. Yeah. I'm always interested in the other guys in the class and kind of just their read of the situation. Because, they're keeping up. They know what's going on, so it's interesting stuff. Before we go, obviously, ChampU BBQ coming up this weekend. Like you said, you have the full visitor list up for our VIP members. I make this disclaimer every time we have a big visit weekend. I'll do so again. The full list is on Sooners Illustrated. We are not going to go through it all on the podcast here. A, because that would take forever. And B, because that's why you subscribe, right? We can't cover everything on the show. We talk about a lot of good stuff on the show, a lot of good information, but we can never cover everything. But for both those reasons, A, why would we do that? We want you to subscribe, but also B, it's just too much to do it all. Collin's got a ton of stuff on there. So CK, ChampU BBQ, it's one of the biggest weekends of the year for Oklahoma recruiting, if not the biggest, in the middle of summer. They've been doing this forever, even going back to the previous regime. That's how you kind of know it was a big thing, is that it actually crossed over from Lincoln Riley to Brent Venables, one of the very, very few things, maybe the only thing really that has kind of stayed the same from staff to staff. For you this weekend, the storylines, the headlines, the players in particular that have your interest, whatever direction you want to take it, ChampU BBQ weekend. Obviously, again, huge weekend, always is. They, have the big party on the field at the stadium where they, just like it sounds, have a big barbecue. I don't know if are they going to have the Lambos and stuff this time? I don't know. They've done that before. We'll find out.
I think the entire college football landscape is trending away from the high-end cars.
I don't know when that became a thing or what it even means. It's just like, look, cool car, come play here. For you, ChampU BBQ weekend, what are the headlines? What are you watching for? What do the fans need to know going into it? And obviously, we'll break it all down and react to it afterward. But going into it, where do your eyes go?
Yeah, so I try to pick like 5 guys that I think are noteworthy.
Yeah,
maybe 6. We'll go because it's a barbecue. We'll go 6-pack here. Share a 6-pack.
Perfect.
let's start with another committed prospect, Josh. How about that? Jaden O'Neal isn't the only one that OU's got to lock down. Does Daniel Odom show up this weekend? I think he is showing up. 4-star wide receiver pledge out of St. John Bosco. At the time that he committed, that was a big deal, and it was somewhat out of the blue. Oklahoma swung that one in its favor pretty quickly.
And he is still the highest rated guy in the class composite. The highest rated guy. I don't think people totally always realize that. His composite number, the highest in this class right now.
And I've seen him in person. I really appreciate when I can see the non-South Central guys with my own eyes. And Daniel Odom, he's a looker. Like it checks out at receiver. But I think this is someone who, whether it's Washington, who has felt really good about this one, or Florida State, because the other layer to this is Daniel Odom committed to Oklahoma because it was an opportunity to play with his childhood best friend in Jaden O'Neal. So you got to figure that stuff out with Odom as well.
Yeah.
And I guess you kind of have to identify what exact role the Bentley O'Neal saga plays in the recruitment of Odom. Because however the next few days go, whatever O'Neal is deciding to do or what O'Neal has in terms of conversations going on, Odom's probably going to be listening in pretty intently, right? So I think that Daniel Odom, I've heard like UW has felt really good about the flip candidacy here for a while. Mm-hmm. I haven't followed up exactly with the Florida State side, but obviously FSU would theoretically have a shot at getting him if they get Jaden O'Neal, right? So I think that's the first one for me, Josh, is we'll talk a lot about Jaden O'Neal as the committed guy that has to get figured out, but Daniel Odom is right up there in terms of importance too.
For sure. And, the assumption, at least on my end, and I'm sure a lot of fans' end, has been these guys are a package, right? I mean, like if O'Neal leaves, Odom leaves too. So that'll be a question for me coming out of this. Is there any wiggle room there? Like O'Neal leaves, could they still retain Odom or not? That would be an obvious question, I think, for a lot of fans coming out of this weekend that maybe we'll have a better idea of. So we'll see.
Right. I don't think that they are 100% must go to the same school type of guys, as evidenced by some of the other stuff that's gone on to this point. But exactly to your point, it's like, how much does the opportunity to play together, that opportunity that fueled the Oklahoma commitment for Odom, how much does that then play in a role in whatever the next few days look like for both of these individuals? Speaking of playing together, Nico Jandro will be at Oklahoma this weekend. The safety commit family's going to be coming with him. And with that means his twin brother, Bowe Jandro, the linebacker. Bowe Jandro has visited Texas and Oregon. Like in almost any other situation, those are two programs right now you really would rather not go toe-to-toe with in a recruitment, right?
Sure. For a lot of reasons. Yeah.
For a lot of reasons. Now, I'm not saying that Oklahoma ever really backs down from those battles, but like we've talked a lot about some of the dynamics. Oregon and Texas are two programs that are as hot as anybody right now on the trail. That being said, Oklahoma is feeling really good about Bowe Jandro because of the opportunity to have him play alongside his twin brother from the preps level to the collegiate level. And I think that for a long time, that's been the belief of where this thing is going. Now, again, you don't want to discount Oregon and Texas, but you also, you never want to have that idea where you're speaking for the other player and suddenly that becomes an issue with the recruit. But we talked about this before, Oklahoma's track record with brothers. Hard to see a world where OU doesn't get this one figured out, right? I would also further this by saying there has been a lot of buzz about Braxton Lindsey, the linebacker, and understandably so. But we also know that Braxton Lindsey for a long time has been considered a lean to BYU. Because Braxton Lindsey is LDS and planning to go on a mission or whatever, if I remember correctly. And then also, I don't know if I've talked about this much, but BYU's willingness to employ the NIL rev share sphere, like that's very real. So if Bo Jandro is someone that ends up being the guy that rounds out Oklahoma's linebacker class, and OU understands that and then presses harder in this recruitment, don't be surprised if that kind of adds a layer to what's coming next for the Jandro family and OU.
Yeah, I mean, that's a spot, anytime you've got one brother and they're twin brothers, I think you're feeling very confident you can get the other one. I'll tell you what, if Bo were to land with Texas, that's insane. I mean, that's just insane. Have twin brothers go on either side of the Red River. But we'll see, you're talking about Nico Jandro back when he committed, that personality and that family seems like great fits for Brent Venables and his staff. So, again, like you said, it seems from an outside perspective on my part, very likely, or at least if you're Oklahoma, you feel pretty good about securing that, I would think. And so that'll be interesting to keep up. I mean, it's hard to beat that brother. If you're the other schools, you're fighting uphill. Even if you are Texas and Oregon, you're fighting an uphill battle trying to split those guys up. So we'll see. But got to feel like you're in a pretty good spot there for Oklahoma, I would imagine.
Yeah, maybe the best way I can describe it, and kind of expanding on the little blip that I had earlier, is it's like I don't think Oklahoma is ever necessarily going to back down from recruiting battles with Texas or Oregon, because to their credit, like they have won, and Oklahoma's a blue blood program. Like these programs should be battling it out for similar prospects. Maybe the best way to phrase it, though, is if you're trying to lock down a twin brother in that recruitment, programs like Oregon and Texas are going to challenge you more than others. You know what I mean? Which isn't ideal whenever you're trying to round out your linebacker class. And we know how much this OU staff likes to invest in the linebacker position. Let's go to the offensive side of the ball again here. This guy is kind of an enigma to me, because the other day, I am proud to announce that my neighborhood is apparently SEC ready, because a Bojangles opened down the street from me.
Oh, man. I've never had Bojangles. It was one.
Literally all of 2 left turns from the house now. So the Southeastern Conference influence is really trickling into the Dallas area. So the other day, I'm like, I wake up early, get some stuff going. Wife goes off to work, and I'm like, you know what? Like, let me go try some Bojangles. Let me get going before a big recruiting weekend here. Because I wanted the first thing for me to try be the chicken biscuit. Pretty good. That aside.
Good to know.
From the 2 left turns it takes me to get to the Bojangles, the drive through and back that morning in that little sequence, I think I had 3 or 4 people call me or text me about Zachary Turner out of Duncanville.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just talk of the town right now. And it's, it's funny. You're the Oklahoma beat reporter guy living in Dallas. Well, everyone's going to hit you up about the Duncanville Cats, and Zachary Turner.
Right.
Zachary Turner's no different. So this one is Oklahoma, SMU, Miami. I personally am led to believe it's really between the Canes and the Sooners. I think on the Oklahoma side, Zachary Turner is this hybrid jumbo pass catcher who has fancied himself. My wife makes fun of me when I say that, has fancied himself as a receiver, but a lot have recruited him as a tight end. I think if you're Oklahoma, what you got going for yourself right now is Emmett Jones. Talked about this before, but a product of the Dallas-Fort Worth high school coaching scene, a legend in the Metroplex, especially down that way. And then Emmett Jones, that figure, that presence, recruiting Zachary Turner as a wide receiver, not a tight end. I do think that Zachary Turner, if he had his druthers, I'm throwing out all the fancy words here.
Yeah.
If he had his preference pan out, it would be play wide receiver. And I went to Zach Turner's spring game at Duncanville. Like that's only, to me, been furthered over the course of time. He's gotten bigger and stronger seemingly, and yet he was doing a ton of receiver stuff out there at DeVille's spring game. And I think Oklahoma, being close to home, but also a new experience for him, and the ability to play wide out for someone like Emmett Jones, I think that's a big deal. On the flip side, Miami is recruiting Zach Turner as a tight end, but Miami is Miami. That staff recruits as hard as anyone in the country. Mario Cristobal, I've had a lot of folks tell me stories about what it's like to work for him. I have to assume that Cristobal is making sure everyone is on top of their recruitment of Zach Turner in that building. And I think the opportunity to play tight end for a staff that has shown very frequently that they care about him, but then also go play out there in Coral Gables, that area. I mean, it's awesome, right? Living there is pretty cool if you're playing college football. And I think that Miami, as we know, is very aggressive in the rev share NIL front. And so very interesting battle here shaping up. I think Miami's feeling good. I think Miami's hopeful, but I also think they're keeping a close eye on this visit. You know, Josh, like, man, we've had a couple of Miami, Oklahoma recruiting battles in the Brent Venables tenure.
We have, yeah.
This seems to be shaping up as another one as the ChampU BBQ approaches.
Yeah, no, Zachary Turner's an interesting player. You know, he camped last year, so got a chance to see him then, and obviously that was a year ago. But even then, it was like, yeah, that guy's got a body that you could see as an SEC tight end. Him maybe being a wide receiver is interesting to me. Because again, just seeing him in shorts and shirt, he looks like a tight end, right, at the high school level. But if the athleticism is there, which it probably is, to bump outside, be a wide receiver would be interesting to me, certainly. You know, we talked about before, you know, you have Ryder Mix committed at tight end right there. Who was the other tight end target there?
Tyler Ruxer.
Yeah, he's committing in July. You know, they feel like they're in decent shape for him potentially, you know. So that tight end recruit out. So the tight end room, you know, we talk about it to death, but the recruiting in 26 with Mix in there, and you have a shot with Ruxer and, you know, maybe Turner now, but he might not be a tight end. Like, that position recruiting is very intriguing to me right now. But I like Zach Turner as a player, certainly. So he's one that is of interest, I think, for OU fans moving into this weekend for sure, with him being in town. And you know, again, things that might become more apparent after this weekend. Would it be a tight end, or is he considering wide receiver? Is that something that gives OU a leg up, where you said Miami's looking at him as a tight end? Does he want to be a wide receiver? Does that help Oklahoma? These are all questions that, you know, probably become more apparent over time. But, you know, interesting player there, and one that I think has a chance to be really talented. And I'll say Duncanville. I mean, that's a program that, you know, we talk about Duncanville guys every couple of months. There's a new one, it seems like. So
I think a lot of fans out there are going to be thinking, man, can Oklahoma finally break into Duncanville? And you know, like there's the Savion Bird. I know how that panned out, but like, we'll see. I will say on that note, and again, like, I'm going to write extensively about Zach Turner today/tonight about everything that I've heard to this point. I think one thing that probably you don't love if you're Oklahoma is like Kevin Ford Jr., the edge rusher out of Duncanville, was supposed to be in town this weekend. Obviously, that's played out the way that it has. And I noted this on the site for our subscribers, but like I was interviewing Zach Turner at the Duncanville spring game, and Kevin Ford walked by and shouted, "OU, OU," as Turner and I are talking. So you would have preferred to have that vocal presence, right? Even if Ford wasn't necessarily headed in your direction. All right, so we're 3 down, 3 more to go here in the 6-pack for the barbecue, and I will go to Jordan Clay, 4-star wide receiver out of the greater San Antonio area. I'm a big fan of this kid. He's a great kid. I've had great conversations with him over the last year or so. And he's product of one of my favorite stories in this cycle, man. I've talked about this before, but just again, for those that aren't familiar, Jordan Clay has long been a highly touted receiver prospect. He hadn't gotten the Oklahoma offer for a while. He was curious as to why, what the holdup was. They invited him and his family last fall to a game. And then the OU staff, before kickoff of one of the Saturday outings, they pulled Jordan Clay to the 50-yard line in the middle of the field, give him his Oklahoma offer. And I think that's really cool. I think just like Jordan Clay said, that goes to show you what they think about him, how much they value him. And I think that Oklahoma, because of this dynamic, has a real shot here going into the weekend. Now, Baylor has long been considered the favorite. And the Bears are very hopeful about their opportunity to close. We've talked a lot about Baylor and Oklahoma battles. I know that OU fans may not love that, or they're just curious why Baylor is so involved with so many guys. If you've seen the T-shirts out there, folks, Baylor is now playing the NIL rev share game, and they've got good recruiters on staff with guys like Keenan Hall, for example. And so Baylor is becoming an attractive destination because of the relationships in place there, and then some of the opportunities that are presented there. And talented guys are going to get an opportunity to play there quicker sometimes, right? So Jordan Clay going into the weekend, if we talk wide receiver recruiting, I'm not sure that Jordan Clay gets brought up a ton by the OU fan base in comparison to some of the other targets, and I totally understand why. But Jordan Clay, man, he's kind of like that smooth operator, the quiet, calm, collected type. And I will say, though, just like messaging him this morning, he's very excited to head to Oklahoma, and I think OU is excited to have him.
Yeah, easy sell on Clay. I mean, 6'3", top 100 player, top 10 wide receiver. I mean, there's not much to sell here. Really good player. So that's one that if Oklahoma could find a way to make some headwinds with, you sign up for that right now, obviously. So big one there.
Josh, remind me what high school you went to again?
Owasso, Oklahoma, in the greater Tulsa area.
What do you say we talk about a Ram here?
Sure.
Taj Overton, Owasso, stand up.
Ram
a
pride.
lot of Owasso Ram representation here on the show with Taj Overton and Josh Callaway, a couple of legends. So, I was thinking about this morning. Is Taj Overton the most under-discussed blue-chip recruit to come out of the state of Oklahoma in recent memory?
Yeah, I feel like we don't talk about how good he is. Yeah.
Because, CJ Nixon obviously was the definition of an enigma last cycle, but we talked about CJ Nixon a ton. I mean, we talked about CJ Nixon on this show during that cycle. I couldn't tell you how many times. I don't know how many occasions or opportunities we've had to talk Taj Overton, but man, this guy is just. So Oklahoma's bringing him in, and here's what I'm going to say. If you hop on the board right now and you go through some of the notes that we have not only put out but are getting ready to put out as well, the defensive tackle board is breaking down here or setting up for Taj Overton to be one of the more important recruits of the cycle, because you've got a blue chip prospect at a premium position within state lines. He plays at a spot at interior defensive line where you got to have those kind of bodies to play in the SEC. And if that's not too far down the road for you at a place like Oklahoma, can't let those guys leave, right? But Ole Miss, speaking of the SEC, has been pressing heavily on Taj Overton. Ole Miss, one of my favorites, Randall Joyner is the defensive line coach out there. I have not been able to talk about him much, but he's kind of someone who has a lot of influence here in the DFW Metroplex.
Yeah.
Really hard recruiter. Like, recruits love him, outgoing guy, and he's really kind of flexing his muscles here with Overton. So now it's Oklahoma's turn, and OU's going to have to acknowledge that with the final say here, in theory, the Sooners have a chance to swing an in-state elite recruit in their favor. How this goes, I don't know. I think Oklahoma has obviously a shot to close on him, but a lot of moving pieces with defensive tackles. So you never want to call it a close-up shop situation, especially with how they approach talent acquisition, like Randall Joyner, Lane Kiffin. They're not going to go away. So
yeah,
Taj Overton, again, I know we don't get to talk about him a lot. I think that's honestly kind of his intent because he likes to just kind of go about his business, but huge visitor at OU this weekend, and arguably one of the most important on this list.
For sure. Taj, obviously a high-end elite defensive line talent in state. The emphasis there, or the importance there, is kind of obvious. We talked about it a little bit last week. Tavian Branch moves on. He lands at Rutgers, puts a little extra, adding to that defensive line group here in 26. Taj is a big one, and he's one that OU fans, I would imagine, will be frustrated if they don't get. And fairly so. Again, high-end player in state. Obviously a program that Owasso, I'm biased, my alma mater, but the last 4 or 5 years has been as good as any in the state of Oklahoma. And obviously he's pumped out some really good players. So big one there, obviously. Anytime you get, really anytime high-end guy in state like that, you want him to play at Oklahoma, right? I mean, it just kind of goes without saying. So big one there for sure. One more. Rip it.
All right. Last guy on my checklist here, literally wrote up a checklist. The highest ranked attendee, if I remember correctly, is Jake Kroll, the edge rusher out of IMG Academy. This is Oklahoma's highest priority at edge, top target on the board there. There are a couple of other edge rushers in town, and OU's in a really good spot for some of them. Obviously, they have Matthew Nelson in the boat already. And it all combines to basically say OU's going chips to the center of the table for Jake Kroll. That being said, took an official visit to Florida. Florida is a program that he's labeled his childhood dream school, favorite program. That OV, it sounds like, went extremely well. It sounds like the Gators answered a lot of questions. He had a really fun time, and now I think that Florida might have taken the lead. I think that there is a lot of speculation here that Ohio State may try to get some resurgence going. That being said, the Buckeyes, they lost out on edge rusher Luke Waffle today. Kevin Ford out of Duncanville, we mentioned earlier, is going to take an OV there this weekend. So if you're Oklahoma, you're like, have all of that happen over there so that Jake Kroll can focus on what's going on over here. And if this does shape up to be a Oklahoma-Florida recruiting battle, legitimately could end up going either way. That being said, I thought that Oklahoma had a lead, quote unquote, before the summer OVs. Gators made the most of their opportunity. Now it's up to Oklahoma to really go, quote unquote, get their guy at edge rusher and someone that they've loved for a long time.
Yeah, Jake Kroll's obviously really talented player. It feels like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, like Bowe Bentley's obviously priority uno quarterback and everything. But after Bentley, I mean, is Kroll the next guy? I mean, it feels like he's right up there as far as kind of importance and just kind of all of it. You put in all the context, like he's right up there in terms of like priority list, I would imagine, and that's how it feels. Certainly,
I think there's definitely an argument, and I would say that if you wanted to take the obvious of the quarterback away, then you'd be hard pressed to maybe find someone else that makes as much sense for that label as Jake Kroll,
Yeah, and Miguel Chavis, give him a lot of credit. He has recruited his position very well in the mix for another high-end guy here. So definitely a big one, a big name to watch this weekend, no doubt about that. Great stuff. Obviously, ChampU BBQ this weekend. It's a big weekend, Norman. Always is, has been for a long time. And Collin will be all over it. CK is always on top of everything in recruiting, but I feel like this has been a really extra big month for Collin. I feel like he's been pumping stuff out every day over on Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma 247sports.com. Not a coincidence that we've been doing well with the new subscribers. So be sure to subscribe. Again, put it up here, Oklahoma 247sports.com. Special deal with June. What is the exact deal again in June?
50% off.
50% off. That's right. Great time, obviously. And if you are interested in recruiting at all, which if you watch the show, you are, tons of content there and much more to come. ChampU BBQ this weekend. And again, I say this every time, Collin does obviously a phenomenal job, but it's not just Collin. We have got the entire 24/7 Sports Network at our disposal. Just this week, tons of great stuff from our North Carolina staff with Conroy, Florida State staff with Jaden O'Neal, and of course, all our national guys. Like the 24/7 Sports Army is phenomenal at what they do. So you'll be all over everything if you subscribe. It's not just our site. You get access to every 24/7 Sports everything. And so do it. It's certainly worth it. And to be glued in throughout what's going to be a busy summer and obviously a huge weekend here coming up and a lot more to come, fall camp, all that good stuff down the road as well, obviously, which is kind of, getting a little closer, little by little. Every show, it's like a little bit closer. I put in credential for SEC Media Days this week. Like we're getting there. We're getting there. We're navigating the summer. So CK, appreciate you as always. Get some rest when you can. I know it's hard to do, but get some rest when you can. And we'll catch up next week, man. And obviously we'll break down all of ChampU BBQ. And I've been mentioning this last several shows, but when there's a Bowe Bentley news, almost certainly barring, just being at a really inopportune time or something, Collin and I will probably hop on here for a quick, instant reaction show on YouTube and on the podcast feed as well. So keep an eye out for that whenever that may be. But if something does happen before next week, we'll talk to you then. We'll wrap up ChampU BBQ and everything else going on this side.
I think that's it. I mean, we'll see how this weekend goes.
Yeah.
And then decision season will be upon us. There are a ton of guys that I was not able to get into on the show.
Oh, yeah.
I legitimately believe that Oklahoma's in closing territory with a few guys. So, and like I mentioned, my plan is to sit down and write a good amount of like OV previews for these cats. So you will know why I feel the way that I do in relation to OU and some of these prospects. And then decision season will be here before you know it, which
no doubt,
that's when you really want to buckle up. So excited for it. We'll stay in the fight, if you will, and I hope that you guys will join us for it all.
Absolutely. That's it for now. Back next week with James and Tom, likely on Monday. Back with Collin later next week as well. Obviously to wrap up ChampU BBQ, all that other good stuff. Be sure to subscribe. Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma.247sports.com. For Collin Kennedy, I'm Josh Callaway signing off for now. We'll see you next time right back here as always on Sooners Illustrated.